If you want to learn how to research a stock using the Robinhood app, then I'm going to show you exactly how to do that on my phone. We're going to look up an individual company and an ETF because there are some differences as far as what you can get from the data on Robinhood. But I do want to warn you, Robinhood doesn't have a ton of information on companies, but they have enough to at least get you started. Okay, so inside of the Robinhood app, we're just going to look up an individual company, and you can do that by either looking up the ticker symbol or just the company name. Now, in this case, we're going to look up Apple. So I'm just going to search here, APPLE, and the first one that pops up is AAPL, which is their ticker symbol. And it looks like I own 1.77 shares of Apple. So that's the correct one we want to go into. Just click on that here. And right at the top, it's going to default you to the 1-day market value. And because the market's open right now, you can see that it's fluctuating every second or two. And right now it's at about $170 a share. Now, what Robinhood allows you to do is you can look at a 1-week chart, a 1-month chart, 3 months, 1 year, and then 5 years. And that's as far as you can go. You can't go any further back than 5 years. And that's a little bit frustrating sometimes because for older companies, maybe you want to look at a little more data than that. But 5 years is still a really good amount of information. Now, right next to the 5-year here, you can actually click on a candlestick chart, which will give you more information as to what's happening to the stock on a daily basis, whether it's going up or down, based on where it started and where it ended. So if you click on that here, you can actually see over the 5-year mark that it's pretty obvious that if you're seeing more green days rather than red, then they're obviously having more good days than bad days. And then we can also look at the other numbers here. So if we go into 3 months, you can see right here towards the beginning of the 3 months, so a few months ago, mostly red days. But then as we're moving forward, we can see mostly green days. So this is just a little bit easier to see on a daily basis what's kind of happening, where they started and where they ended. But this is something you can also look at inside Robinhood. And then if you want to go back to the other way of looking at it, just click that same chart next to the 5-year mark. Now, just remember that the saying goes, buy low, sell high. So obviously, if you're buying right now into Apple, technically speaking, you are buying high, but you don't really know what they're going to do in the future, because if they keep going up, then obviously you kind of would be buying low. But typically you want to wait until there's a pullback in the company, meaning the stock price goes down quite a bit, and that's when you get in on your position when you're looking at investing in one of these companies. And then if you are new to the Robinhood app, you can get a free share just for signing up with them. It's going to be valued from about $2.50 all the way to $225. So maybe you're one of the lucky people and you can get a pretty dang good share just for signing up with them. But if you do have an interest, I have an affiliate link in the description below. So check that out if you're interested and you're new to the Robinhood app. And then if you scroll down from here, you're going to see my position. Now, obviously, if you don't own any shares of Apple, this isn't going to exist. But because I do own a little bit of them, this information is going to be here. So I own 1.77 shares, market value of $301 with an average cost of $127.44. So versus what it's trading at today of $170, I've made some money on this position. So today's return, I've made about $8.50, which is incredible because they're up 2.89%, which is very high. And then the total return looks like I've made about $75 from the total investment. Now, if we scroll down here, you're going to see recurring investments. This is just asking if I want to set it up so that I can buy shares of Apple every single month or every single week through Robinhood. This is a very handy feature, but I'm not going to be using it on this. And so that's why it's available right there. Now we're going to scroll down here, and this information is going to be here for every single company. And you can read the About Apple paragraph here. And it's just going to say basically a snippet of what the company does. So Apple Incorporated engages in the design, manufacture, and sale of smartphones, personal computers, tablets, wearables, and accessories, and other variety of, and then you can show more, and you can read the rest of it if you choose to, and you can learn a little bit more about what the company does. We're just going to click on show less here. Now, the CEO, Tim Cook, founded 1976, 154,000 employees, and it's headquartered in California. Now the stats, this is what we're really going to be looking at here. And the stats for individual companies are always going to look exactly the same on Robinhood. So you're just going to scroll down here. They're going to have the open. That's referring to today's open. So it opened at $169 a share. And then today's high so far is 171.58. And I say so far because it's still open for another 30 minutes and things can change. Now the low so far is 168.34. So you can kind of tell how big the swing is going just based on the high and the low. And then below that, we're looking at a 52-week high and a 52-week low. You can see that 171.58 is the highest, which is a little bit higher than what we're at today. So today isn't the peak, but the low was 116.21. So that is a pretty big swing. Obviously, they've had quite a bit of gains over the last year. And then right over here, you can see volume and average volume. I'm looking at both of these because we've got 88 million on the volume and then an average of 114. That swing difference isn't super huge. So it tells me, one, that there is a lot of volume. There's a lot of trading volume happening with Apple. But the swing isn't ginormous to the fact that there was something major happening prior to the volume that's happening right now. Now we're going to go into the market cap, which is 2.79 trillion. Now, what this is evaluating is the price per share versus how many shares are out there. So 2.79 trillion, that's kind of how you could say that's how much Apple's worth if everybody sold their shares at the current price. The next number, this one is probably the most important that you can look at on Robinhood, and it's the PE ratio. This is the price to earnings ratio. So basically the price per share versus the price to earnings per share. So what this means is that if you were going to buy a share for what they were really earning, that would be a 1 because you'd buy it at a 1-to-1 ratio. But typically that's never going to happen. And I try to keep the PE ratio between about 1 and 10. Usually it's on the higher side because I hardly ever see a PE ratio that's lower than 5. But right now you're seeing a PE ratio of 29.45. So it's 29 times more expensive than what the company's actually earning. But in the tech world, PE ratios tend to be pretty high. And if you're looking at all of the different competitors, they're probably about the same. Now, the next number is going to be the dividend yield, and this is the dividend that they're paying. So if the company is paying a dividend, you'll see an actual number here, 0.52, that means 0.52%. that Apple is paying annually per share for a dividend. Now, if you scroll down here, we're going to get to the news, and this is always going to change every single day. So 57 minutes ago, Time Magazine has an article that you can read referring to Apple. Reuters 2 hours ago, and then another one 3 hours ago. And so you can read these articles and get up to date on whatever you're interested in the company. Now, you can click on Show More, and this will actually have more articles that you can read referring to the company that you're specifically looking at or in the industry that they're looking at. So if you want to look up and read any of those articles, you don't have to go to those specific websites. You can just look at them right on Robinhood. Now we're going to back up and we're going to go into the analyst ratings. So it looks like they have 41 ratings. Most people are saying buy, 22% are saying hold, 2% are say selling. So that is a pretty easy indicator right there on what you should do if you haven't done any research on the company, but I still wouldn't completely trust it. But it is something that you can go off. And then you're always going to have what the bulls say and what the bears are saying. So the analysts that think Apple's going to go up over time and the analysts that think Apple's going to go down over time. Now, the research report, you can get more in-depth reports from Morningstar. You can unlock. It's called Level 2 Market Data, and there's a lot of companies that have this available, but you do have to be a Robinhood Gold member in order to have this activated, which is $5 a month. So if that's something you're interested in, then it is available. Also, if you scroll to the very top and you're looking at a company, if you just click on the arrow right next to their price, this will also give you basically a shortcut into the level 2 market data. So if you're interested in looking at more information on what buyers and sellers are doing and the bid ask price, then go ahead and do that. But it's still not going to give you information on the actual company as far as their profits, their debt, and stuff like that goes. So as far as Robinhood, you can look up more information, but you do have to pay for that, $5 a month, and that is up to you. Now we're going to scroll back down to where we were. And earnings, this is the next thing we can look at. The earnings, you can look at different quarters. The light green is what they're expected, And then the dark green is what they actually reported. So this is good because the actual earnings per share were higher than what's expected every single quarter for the last 4 quarters. A lot of the time you're going to see one in the red because, it's never going to be perfect, but this is pretty cool looking at Apple over the last year. Now down here, you can look at related lists. This is just built by Robinhood so that you can have shortcuts into different types of companies that are more relevant to the one you're looking at. Now it also says people also own. So people that own Apple tend to own Microsoft, Tesla, Amazon, Disney, and so forth. You can go on and on and on and just see what other people are owning. And then down here, this is my history. So if you don't own anything, this isn't going to exist. But looks like I had a few 39-cent dividends that were reinvested because I've told Robinhood that every time I get a dividend from Apple that I want it reinvested. And so they buy me partial shares each time those dividends come out, and I don't have to do anything. It just does it automatically. And then you can show more and you can look at more of your history. And that is it. That's all you have as far as looking up a company. So if you're interested in looking up Apple on Robinhood, this is as far as you can go. Now, if you want to compare it to another competitor, which in this case would be Microsoft, we could pretend that they're apples to Apple. And we're going to scroll up to the top here. And remember, the PE ratio was at 29.45. Okay, so we're going to remember that, 29.45. And let's look at a 1-year return of 39%. Okay, so 39%. So now let's look up Microsoft. Okay, so let's look up the year. So it looks like they've had a 55% year. So this is looking at the last 52 weeks. So that's obviously higher than Apple right there. And then we're going to scroll down into the stats. And you can see right here that their PE ratio is a 36.46. So even though they had more gains, that's awesome, but their PE ratio is higher than Apple's. So based on kind of what you're looking for in the future is what you could base it on if you're going to invest in either Microsoft or Apple. So in the last year, they've had higher gains, but their PE ratio is higher. So it does mean that you're paying more per share. It kind of just means that they're technically more expensive. But you can also look at a 5-year chart. So let's look here. Over the last 5 years, they've had 458% gains. So let's look up Apple again. Apple, 458% versus 518%. So right here, Apple's winning for the last 5 years versus the last 5 years for Microsoft. Now, as far as your gains in 5 years, yes, you would have done better if you invested in Apple rather than Microsoft, but these are both extremely high gains, and it doesn't give you the entire picture on how the company is looking into the future. Now, as far as Robinhood goes, this is as far as you can go on the data. And what I would always recommend is that you download the Yahoo Finance app or the Yahoo, whatever you call it, because that is going to give you more data inside of companies and you can actually see a little bit more inside of them. So right here, I just opened the Yahoo Finance app and I'm just going to look for the same company. I'm going to type in Microsoft. They are going to give me more data. And the cool thing is I can actually look up further than 5 years. So if I track down here, I can click on Max, and this is going to give me way more information all the way back to 1989 to now. So if you really want to look at that kind of information, it's a lot more robust. Obviously on a phone, it's harder to read, but on a desktop, you can really look at some cool information. And then you can scroll down here, you can get key statistics. Some of this stuff is basically the same as what you're already looking at on Robinhood, but a little more in-depth. But if you click on show all key statistics, you can go into everything regarding Microsoft. So you can look at the valuation measures, trading information, stock price history, share statistics, dividends and splits. I'm always looking at this type of stuff. Financial highlights, profitability, management effectiveness, and their income statement and their balance sheet and cash flow statement. So all of this information is right here as well. And that's right inside the Yahoo Finance app. So go ahead and look at that if you want to get more of this really key information on certain companies that you're looking up. Now I'm going to look up an ETF on Robinhood because they do have a little bit more information than they used to. And this is a good thing because now I don't have to go to multiple places to look for the same information. So in this case, I'm going to look up VOO, which is Vanguard's S&P 500 Index ETF. And then we are just going to go through the same information that we did with Microsoft and Apple. So VOO is the ticker symbol. I own 1.31 shares of them, it looks like. So right now they're trading for $429.53. We have the exact same information here. We can get level 2 market data if we click that arrow at the top there. And we can also look at the 1 week, the 3 month, 5 year, and the candlestick stuff. So all of that information is there as well. Now, your position, it's going to tell me exactly what's going on and how well or how not well I'm doing in that position. Keep scrolling down. Okay, you can read about the S&P 500 index. We know that, but this is what's different here. So before we get to the stats section, we're going to see this, which is what's in this fund. And you can see right here that the different sectors are charted here by their different amounts that they have as a percentage. So just a different way of looking at the chart. You can see technology, 25%, financial services, 13.77, healthcare, 13. So you can kind of get a glimpse of what's inside the ETF as far as the different sectors go of where it's invested in. Because it's not like they're going to hold an equal amount of the 500 companies that are built into it. And you can tell because if you click on top 10 holdings, you can see right here, 6.35% is Microsoft, 6% is Apple, 3.75% is Amazon. So obviously, it's not like you're blending the 500 different companies fairly throughout the entire ETF. Now, if you want to know exactly what the 500 holdings are inside the S&P 500 index, you are going to have to look that up elsewhere because you are only going to see the top 10 holdings here. But it is a really good quick indicator of kind of what is inside of the ETF as far as the big holdings go. So that's what's cool about looking up an ETF on Robinhood is because they now give you this basic information of the different sectors and the top 10 holdings inside the ETF. Now we're going to scroll down to stats. And all of the information is going to be pretty much the same, but there are a couple differences here. And one is the expense ratio, because this will actually tell you how much it costs to have this ETF. Now, 0.03, this is extremely cheap. This is basically going to cost you $3 per year for every $10,000 that you have invested. So it is extremely cheap compared to a lot of the different mutual funds out there. A lot of those could be upwards 1 to 2%, which is so expensive. So 0.03 is hardly anything. Now, the cool thing here to keep in mind is if you were looking up another competitor of the S&P 500 index, there's another one called SPY. So let's just look them up. SPY. You can actually see down here, because they're obviously tracking the exact same thing, but they have an expense ratio of 0.09. So it's 3 times more expensive to have this ETF. Obviously, it's still extremely cheap, but that really can make a difference when you're talking a ton of money. So we're going to scroll back up here and we're going to look at the 1 year that the ETF is done. And you can see 26.52 over the past year. So let's look up VOO again. So remember 26.52 versus 26.62. So the Vanguard ETF has actually performed better over the last year, and you don't have as high of an expense ratio. So that is something you can definitely compare because you already have that expense ratio built into the stats, like I said. And another really cool stat that Robinhood added for their ETFs is the AUM, which stands for Assets Under Management. And basically what this means is how much money is inside of the fund. And so if you see something like $270 billion, you know that that fund is ginormous. And so any type of fluctuation, any volatility is not going to affect it. Versus if you were looking up an ETF that only had $1 million backing it, I wouldn't really trust that. I would want something a lot bigger. And so when you can see that right here, the AUM inside of Robinhood, this is a really good thing to look at when you're considering what type of an ETF you actually want to invest in, as far as how much money they actually have backing it up and funded in the account. And then the other thing you can do is you can also look up the prospectus and the reports. This data can be useful, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. They kind of go over the fees and everything like that, and they go into more depth on the risk of investing with them. But they do talk about the fees and how much they actually cost you over time. So if you want to get an idea of your risk and how much it's going to cost you to own the ETF, then you can look up this information. And this is the kind of stuff that you are going to get right here by looking up an ETF. Now, everything else is going to be exactly the same. It's going to include my history, everything like that. But those are the key differences between looking up an ETF and an individual company. So that's it. Thanks for watching this video. If you guys are interested in more of this type of content, definitely subscribe. But thanks for watching. That's all.